Jeff, welcome to the show, man.
Dude, I am so glad to be here, and it's so nice to reconnect. Like we were just saying, it's been over 2 years, and it's crazy how time flies.
Dude, it's insane. And I think obviously with COVID, right? Like, so the world shut down. It was like I blinked and it was 2 years later. Like, it was just a weird fast forward type of process during that time, although insanely busy and with shifts in the business. And I'm sure you the same. But I was on your podcast years ago, and it's funny because like I had such success in podcasting at the time, just really began business success. But I feel like my world has changed so much since then, as far as like growth and the different things that I'm involved in. And the funny thing is, I was on your show, and like 3 months after I was on your show, I get a random text from somebody I hadn't heard from in years, right? And they go, "Hey, do you know Jeff Lerner? Like, I know you're doing podcasting. Do you know Jeff Lerner?" And I was like, really weird. Like, I was literally just on his show a couple months ago, and they said that they were a part of your community. And I was like, that's really, really cool. He was just curious if I had known you, and just like this weird full circle moment. So I'm glad to be sitting down with you to share your journey, because you're impacting entrepreneurial lives all over the world on a daily basis. And not many people can say they do that. But why don't we start with who is Jeff today? And then we're going to break down how you got there.
Okay. Who is Jeff today? I appreciate the question. It probably depends who you ask. So this is Jeff in the eyes of Jeff. I'll start with the sort of the tangible, I'll call it the superficial, right? So I'm the CEO and founder of Ontra Institute, which is, we're really a company. I mean, the easiest label to put on us is, entrepreneurial education, right? Like, we teach people how to either build a business or a skill set that is monetizable in the modern economy, right? So I think entrepreneurship has changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and especially in the last 2 or 3 years, even like through the pandemic. And so we're kind of like, I'm proud to say I think we're one of, if not the foremost platforms, just in terms of size and growth. We've had over 275,000 students in a little over 3 years, that teaches people how. Yeah, I know. I have the same reaction when I say that number. Like,
Yes.
like
That's
dang,
insane. Like, that's a massive number.
It is. It's crazy. And I'll get into the story of how that happened. I mean, to some degree, it's, luck is when opportunity meets preparation, right? And so, I mean, in some degree, we were in the right place at the right time, but we created that opportunity for ourselves, and we were somewhat prepared for it. And we were at least scrappy enough to identify what additional preparation was undone and to scramble and get it done so that we didn't collapse under the weight of our growth. And that's a whole story. Actually, a pretty cool entrepreneurial story to scale from. It's interesting. You mentioned 2.5 years ago, roughly, when you came on the show. At that time, let's see, that would have been like I think it was late spring 2020, maybe just after COVID had kind of broken, right?
Interesting. Okay.
And I think at that time we were probably a run rate, maybe like a $3 or $4 million a year run rate company. We're way more than 10 times bigger than that now in just 2 years. And,
wow.
Our team, we probably had 25 or 30 people on the team now. Now we have over 250. I mean, if I just look at our Slack workspace, I think we're over 250 head count. Like, it's just been crazy growth. So there's an entrepreneurial lesson in how we were able to grow so fast and not die. And depending on how vulnerable I'm wanting to be, I'll admit how close we came to crumbling under the weight. So we can get into that. But now, here we are. I think I've got a decent brand, personal brand that's growing. It's hard to really, really grow a personal brand at the same time that I'm the day-to-day CEO of this business, right? But I wrote a book recently that was a bestseller late last year. I do have obviously have a podcast. My podcast has grown a lot. I've been following in the footsteps of guys like you and learning from guys like you about how to grow a healthy, long game podcast, really building it as a long-term asset, not just trying to, flash or burn too hot. And yeah, I mean, I'll say this. So I'm a former jazz musician. So I have, I think that colors everything that I do. I have a particular set of beliefs about where fulfillment comes from and what the most important currencies are in life. Despite what some people might say or believe or superficially assume, I'm not really motivated by money. A person who's motivated by money doesn't typically drop out of high school to become a jazz musician.
Yeah. And that's such an intriguing thing. I mean, I have friends who are jazz musicians and very, very good. And their mindset is so different than most entrepreneurs you run into. So your mix that you've brought into the world is just so unique.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's one of the ingredients in our formula that's been really successful. So I had a couple of successful businesses, and bottom line is in 2018, late 18, I kind of had my midlife crisis. It lasted about 2 weeks. And I sold my business. I was in the process of selling my business. And finally, just to get it done, I ended up basically saying, I don't care. I'll take the deal that I've been offered. Just take it off my hands. I want to do something else. And I made enough money that I was comfortable, but I could have made more if I'd been a tougher negotiator or more just in it for that. But I really just wanted to create the space to figure out what I was going to do that was the chapter of my life that was really, really focused about meaning. You know, I think up to that point, I had been really focused on freedom, and I had achieved that. Like, I was free. I had enough money that I didn't have to trade my time for the ability to live. And then it became, okay, what am I going to do with this freedom? You know, Mark Twain said the two most important days in a man's life are the day that he's born and the day that he figures out why. And I think in that 2-week window, I had that second day and I got clear. And that was ultimately what led to the founding of Ontra, where, you know, essentially it's now been about 4 years of seeking to answer the question and share the answer with the world. And the question for me at a personal level was, how come I'm 39 years old and I'm retired? And based on the playbook that you're supposed to follow for a successful life, I have done virtually nothing right. And all the people around me that have done what you're supposed to do, I'm the envy. They envy me. I have the freedom that they're after. I have the money that they're after. I have the family that they're after. I have the health that they're after. I have and that's, I'm not saying that from any place of hubris. It was just a reality. It was my operant reality of my life. And so if clearly that's not a credit to me, that's a commentary on the playbook that most people are operating from is an old playbook. It's like if you're in the NFL now and you're running a playbook from the 1950s Vince Lombardi Green Bay Packers, where you try to run the ball every single play, then, like, you know, the Patriots, or who's doing well right now, the Chiefs, they're just going to blow you out of the stadium, dude. Who's your team? Eagles. Oh yeah, they're killing it. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna steamroll you because you're running a playbook that's 60 years old, and that's the reality in the world we live in. Is most people are running a playbook that was built in the 19 teens and the 1920s.
Yeah, this is such an interesting conversation, man. I want to stop you there for a second because there were so many things that you just said over the last couple of minutes that are important, right? I want to talk. We'll get to this, and I want to kind of let people know that we're going to get to it. I want to talk about how you scaled in those 2 years, right? Like, because I think some people miss that from an entrepreneurial standpoint. But you're talking about this old playbook, right? And there's all this narrative of, you know, school is, for lack of a better term, and we're not getting political here, we're not making a thing, but it's an indoctrination into the process of going, being a slave to a job, you know, checking out, hopefully retiring one day. But now millennials, I think it's something like 5 jobs in the first 3 years of employment, where, you know, our grandparents, there was one job their whole entire life, right? So we're completely different now how we approach life. What was I want to know what your aha moment was, right? I know you dropped out of high school. That's ballsy. Talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so when I was 16, my parents made either the greatest parenting decision or the worst parenting decision of their life, depending on how, you know, I look at it or how somebody looks at it and maybe who's looking at it. They sent me to this summer program that was like hiking in the wilderness, you know, backpacking in the mountains, canoeing, kayaking, just like living it up, right? And it was kind of like, so I had gone to the same school. I went to this like small kind of neighborhood private school for 11 years, from kindergarten through my sophomore year of high school. I went to the same school with the same kids. They had the same parents that lived in the same neighborhood, that all had, you know, played from the same playbook and had the same beliefs about the world, where, like, the greatest thing that could possibly happen to you would be to get into either a really good state school, or maybe if you're smart enough, an Ivy League school or something, to graduate, to go become a doctor or a lawyer, or ideally an investment banker, right? And that was the script. And I had been sort of begrudgingly going along with it for 11 freaking years. And then my parents sent me on this backpacking trip for the summer. And it was like, I'd been begging for it for years, because I had friends, they were like, oh, I spent my summer in Colorado climbing Pikes Peak or whatever. And I'm like, Mom, Dad, please, I want to do this. It was just envy. My friends did it. I want to do it. So finally they allowed me to go on this hiking. I met kids that were from different towns, different schools, had different backgrounds. And a lot of them, I didn't know it. And I don't think my parents knew it. But it was kind of one of those programs where, like, if your kid's like getting in trouble, or maybe they're getting into drugs, you send them on these programs, right? And so I was with a bunch of, like, call them like the misfit kids, like the rebels, right? And I spent like 7 weeks of that summer with a bunch of kids that were like, screw the man, screw the plan. Like, we just want to have fun and we want to live and we want to create. And they were, honestly, Justin, they were the coolest kids I'd ever been around. They wrote poetry. We would be hiking up the mountain, and one of them would just start spontaneously singing, just improvising. And then other kids would start harmonizing. And we would talk about God and nature and the meaning of life. And it was like something that had been pent up, just flipped. And my currency, the terminology I use is that my currency got clear in a moment. And what I realize is, I am going home to a system whose primary currency is money as a proxy for safety. It's not, I'm not saying money because everybody's greedy and, you know, this or that, but people want money because they want safety. They want predictability for their life. Right. My currency became freedom. Like, in a summer, I decided I'm 16. I'm supposed to be getting clear on what I want out of life. I want to be free. And I came home and my parents were like, whoa. Like, who is this kid and what happened?
What happened on that mountain?
Yeah. And I was a lot more confident and I was a lot more expressive. And I had found that there was something in me that wasn't just insecure and trying to fit in with his peers and, you know, like that dweeby little teenager that doesn't even fit in his own skin. Like, I was alive for the first time I knew of in my life. And I wanted to be free. So my parents, like, they had a fight on their hands at that point, because I ended up getting kicked out of that school, and then I enrolled in a different school, and then I ended up dropping out of that school. And I basically went to them and I said, essentially, you guys have unleashed a monster and I want to be free. And I have done the math and I figured out there's only a few things I can do in this world that will give me and this was 1995. So there was no like, oh, I'll join the creator economy, or I'll do all these adventurous digital things that millennials now or young people see as a possibility for their life. At the time, it was just like, okay, I either need to become like a writer or a musician or an artist or an actor. And I was like, I know, because I used to play some guitar, that I have a pretty good musical aptitude. And of all the instruments I could learn to play, the one that is most consistently and gainfully employed is a piano player. Right. They make the most money and they get the most gigs, and because they're a one-man band, it's either piano or guitar, like where you can play and sing, and they can just hire one person to fill the room with sound. So you get paid like a whole band, even though you're just one person. And of those two, piano or guitar, I'm like, I'm going to have a better quality of life as a pianist. They're kind of higher, classier gigs, right? So that was my decision why I became a pianist. It wasn't like my soul has a song and I need to sing it. It was like a practical choice based on deciding I wanted a life where I could create and be free, but still survive. And I wanted to be able to travel. And pianists, we can go anywhere in the world, right? It's the same 12 keys, same 12 notes. Yeah. And that's why I became a pianist. And I actually convinced my parents to let me drop out of high school and to buy me a piano. And that was my deal. And then to let me live at home until I was 18, as if I was still in high school. And my part of the deal was, I will practice all day, every day, 6 days a week. I think I need 1 day a week off so that I don't get, crippled in my hands. And I will get good enough in the 2 years that I have left that I can get gigs, and you don't have to worry about me starving or becoming a drug addict. Wow. And that was my moment, was 16.
That's unreal. And your parents probably begrudgingly went, well, he's not backing down.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. I mean, bear in mind, they had already gotten a call from the truancy officer saying, Jeff has missed 21 consecutive days of school. If we see him, we're going to give him a ticket for truancy. And my parents were like, what have you been doing? And I was like, they're like, you get up every morning and you go to school. And I'm like, well, I do get up every morning, but I've actually been driving to a parking lot and sleeping in my car because I've actually been up all night writing poetry, writing songs, like, you know, flexing this creative muscle that I've discovered. So they knew at that point that they were not going to put the genie back in the bottle, so to speak.
Yeah. So how did this lead into entrepreneurship?
Cool. Great. Perfect question. So I did that for a few years, and my initial entrepreneurial venture was actually a way to create additional value so that I could get a gig. And what I mean is I didn't start playing really till I was almost 17 years old, right? And that's really late for a piano player. Like, I had people tell me, like, you're not going to be able to do this. You're too late. All the professionals started when they were 6 or 8 or maybe 10 years old. Pretty much they said, like, if you start after 10, it's uphill to get good enough to be a pro, right? As a pianist. And so I found these guys right around the time I started. I was about 18. I had told my parents, like, I'll get a gig by the time I'm 18 just to show you that this is viable. And so around my 18th birthday, I started auditioning for bands. I was like reading it was called the Houston Press. It was like the local news magazine, and the bands would advertise in the back, like looking for keyboard player or whatever. So I started auditioning, and I finally found this one band that was like, they're like, well, you're not very good. They're like, you're not very good, but you seem really reliable. And I was like, I'll tell you what, I'll come back with a gig. I'll get you a gig. And so I started going out hustling for gigs, and I realized I was actually pretty good at that. I was good at like knocking through gatekeepers, and in the local music industry, the gatekeepers are like bartenders, restaurant managers, club, not even club owners, but like the big door guy at the club. And I would get to the manager, I would get to the owner, and I would get a gig where I would say, look, if we can bring 100 people, will you give us the cover charges or whatever? And so then I went back to the band and I'm like, guys, I got us like 5 gigs. And they were like, well, okay, we'd rather have a mediocre keyboard player and some gigs than a great keyboard player and no gigs. Yeah. So that's actually how I became my first entrepreneurial thing. And then I ended up starting a booking agency. I ended up starting a party promotion company. And then I went into like 10 other things that had nothing to do with the music business. And it all went. And then, so anyway, that was kind of the first flicker. And then I think when the flicker became a flame was in my early 20s, fast forward about 5 years, maybe 23, 24 years old. I was a lot better then. I had actually gotten into college, even though I was a high school dropout. I got into the University of Houston piano performance department. I was working hard. I ended up getting a full ride scholarship in the jazz department. Wow. I actually had a great college career as a piano. I was the first chair jazz pianist in the jazz orchestra at University of Houston, which is basically like being a football player. Like, everything was paid for as long as I did this one thing, which was a 1 hour a day rehearsal and a few concerts a semester. They literally paid for everything. So that was cool. But then I got in with this booking agency, this one agency, and they started booking me, and it was the best booking agency in Houston. It's called Gulf Coast Entertainment. Susie Kreiner, if you're out there, thank you forever. You changed my life. You took a chance on me. And she started booking me into these really high-end private parties. And so I'm not kidding. I played piano for half a dozen billionaires. I could name Tillman Fertitta, the guy that owns the Rockets. He has the show $1 Billion Buyer. I used to play piano at his house. Bob McNair, who owned the Texans, Jim and Francie Crane. Jim Crane now, they're divorced now, but Jim Crane owns the Houston Astros. Gosh, who else did I play for? Oh yeah, Charles Butts, the founder of H-E-B grocery stores. I was literally like, I played James Baker, our former Secretary of State. I played his 80th birthday party with like him and like 9 of his friends at his house.
And it's just you sitting there at this young age.
Yeah.
Jazz piano.
Yeah. And me and like a room full of T. Boone Pickens, the guy that the Oklahoma State football stadium is named after, Fayez Seraphim, who's a billionaire money manager. Like, I played piano at all these guys' houses. It was crazy. And the reason I got the gig, again, this is where I started kind of initially learning a lesson about marketing. I wasn't the best piano player, but my product, in that sense, it was good enough, but I had good packaging. I was young, I was fit. I wore clothes that fit. I didn't smell like cigarettes. I was polite. I was articulate. I didn't, nobody felt like, ooh, is the piano player going to walk off with the silverware and try to pawn it? Like, I just presented okay. And so that's why they felt comfortable sending me into these homes. And I knew how to talk to, I'd grown up around somewhat affluent people. I kind of knew how to, I don't know, play that game or talk that talk. And so anyway, but what I realized, I had an epiphany that like, oh my gosh, all these people that I'm playing for, these billionaires and centimillionaires and founder, they're all entrepreneurs. They have what I really want, which is the freedom, but also because, life gets harder as an artist who's on his own. They know where their rent's coming from at the end of the month. In fact, they own their home. And in fact, they own their $20 million home. So I was like, oh, you can have freedom and money. You just have to own the business.
Yep.
And that was when I really leaned in and I started starting businesses. Every extra $1,000 or $10,000 I could scrounge up, about once a year, I would try to launch some new business. And I failed and I failed and I failed and I failed and I failed. It's in my book. I failed 11 times in my 20s. But at 29, I discovered the world of the digital economy. It was early, but it was like this new internet thing. And I learned about marketing and I learned about funnels and I learned about copywriting. And I've basically been doing that ever since. And there's a whole story there. But yeah, I think that answers your question about how it all began.
No, that's incredible. And I mean, just such a journey. And one thing you had talked about, like, hey, you can go to college, be a doctor, or be a lawyer, be a whatever. The one thing I've realized in my life, including, before I was an entrepreneur, when I was in sales and sales management and I'd sell to medical doctors, they're entrepreneurs too. Like,
yeah,
lawyers and doctors have to go out and build their practice.
The really successful ones.
The really successful ones, right? The ones that take control of their business. And having these conversations when I had this job, but the dream of being an entrepreneur, I was having these conversations and they were literally had to do everything an entrepreneur had to do. They had to figure it all out, but then they were still strapped and stuck within a frame and a network that was built by somebody else. Right. And so I think that there's lessons that you teach that can be learned by anybody, right? Even musicians. Like being a musician, if you don't have entrepreneurial skills as a musician, you're just a broke musician. Like that's just
go look at. I mean, so I'll give you two names for any musicians listening. So go look up Adam Ivy. He's a YouTuber who teaches you how to get gigs as a commercial musician, but he's a creator and he's got an amazing business. Rick Beato, he's a former music producer who now creates amazing content that analyzes great music, and he's built a huge YouTube channel. I mean, there's so many stories. Clinton Sparks, who was a producer for Lady Gaga, now he's an influencer. Yeah. I've had him on my show. Like, there's so many examples. Exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's just beyond true. To create your own wealth, to create your own freedom, more importantly, you have to go down this entrepreneurial path, right? And so obviously you found yourself with great success and you were able to exit some companies and start to build wealth. But then you're like, no, I want to teach other people how to do this, right? Like, what was that like starting, your journey now?
Yeah. So to sum it up at the highest level, in 2008, I was in a ton of debt because the last of those string of failures was actually brick and mortar franchise restaurants with SBA guaranteed loans. So I was up in the ante every gamble, right? It was like, and in 2007, anybody with a pulse could get financing, right? So I had hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans for these two restaurants that I opened right at the beginning of the Great Recession. So the economy collapsed, the restaurants failed. A year after I opened them, I was personally $495,000 in debt between bank loans, lease defaults, taxes, payroll, unemployment taxes, just you name it, right? What
was that stress level like? Holy shit.
I was getting sued by two landlords. I was getting, I owed the federal government $330,000 of those dollars, which when you do SBA loans, what they don't tell you is if you default, it's the US Treasury coming after you. It's the same thing as owing taxes, and there's nowhere to hide. But here's the thing. You say, what was it like? If your currency is money, then being having a negative $500,000 net worth is really, really stressful. If your currency is freedom, then the fact that this isn't 19th century Russia and they're not going to put shackles on me and toss me in the debtor's prison or the gulag, they can't take my freedom just because I owe money. Fortunately, we live in a country where they do not put you in jail for debt unless it's tax debt, right? That's the only difference between SBA debt and tax debt. It's still the US Treasury, but they won't actually put you in jail for SBA debt, right? So, you know, it sucked because I lost my apartment and I lost my marriage. I was married and that fell apart. That really sucked. But at least her parents were nice enough to let us come live with them, even though we were struggling and separated and I got evicted. But like, I was still free. Honestly, I was freer than most millionaires. You know why? Because I didn't have a job.
Yeah.
I was living at my ex-wife's parents' house, hiding in the spare bedroom because I was embarrassed and nobody in the house liked me, including my wife, but especially her parents. So I'm hiding in the room, going on the computer, going like how to make money online, or what to do when your life sucks, or how to dig out of a hole, or how to pay off debt. Like I'm just Googling stuff, and I found the world of digital marketing and affiliate marketing. It was this very nascent, like early stage, like it was like the Wild West back then, right?
Yeah.
But again, to answer the question about the stress, I was still free. And I was still self-determined. And look, when you drop out of high school to become a jazz musician, you make peace with the idea that there's going to be ups and downs, probably a lot of downs, and some of the downs are really going to suck. And that wherever you are, it's your choice to be there. And so nothing really changed for me, except a lot of good things started to change. But anyway, so I did affiliate marketing. Anyway, let me give you the high level summary of how it went from there. So I did 5 years of affiliate marketing, and it took the first 18 months to pay off that debt. So I paid off $500,000 in debt in 18 months.
Wow.
And then over the next 3.5 additional years, I ended up, I say grossing about $10 million in commissions, which is like it was mind blowing to me too, right? Now I'm not saying I kept it all. I was spending a lot of money on ads to run mostly on ads to run the traffic. But I mean, I made like more money in a month during those next few years than I had previously made in usually 1 to 3 years of my life. And I did that for a few years. Huh? Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's life-changing. Yeah.
And I moved to New York and just kind of reinvented my life. And then after 5 years of that, I got kind of burned out on it. And I decided, okay, I've got these skills, and I want to emphasize that word, skills. Everything we're talking about hinges on skills. It's not an opportunity. It's not a company. It's not a product. It's not a business model. It's a set of skills, right? I cannot emphasize that enough, because people go out on the internet and they're looking for, well, should I do a Shopify store, or should I do FBA by Amazon, or should I start a podcast, or should I create an info product, or should I? It's skills, man. If you got the skills, you can do it 10 different ways. And I had built the skills. So in 2012, 13, I was like, okay, I'm kind of burnt on affiliate marketing, but there was this shift happening in brick and mortar business where, and a lot of, I identified service businesses because they're very dependent on local market lead generation, where like they're spending all their ad dollars in the yellow pages, but it's not working anymore because people have shifted to Google Maps. So I started calling up plumbers and roofers and pest control, whatevers, and saying, hey, if your yellow pages ads aren't working anymore, let me take you online. And they were like, dude, I'm tired of losing. I've been a plumber for 20 years. And I got a 22-year-old kid down the street that's taking all my business because he knows how the internet works. And I was like, great, I know how the internet works. Let me take your business online. And over the next nearly 6 years, we brought 11,000 small and medium-sized businesses onto the internet, onto the Google Maps, optimized keywords and profiles. And we built mobile websites, and we did reputation management. And I built a really amazing Inc. 5000 agency over the next 5 years, just taking the same skills and applying them to a different audience. And then in 2018, I sold that. I had one other business in the mix. In 2017, 2018, I actually started a side project. It was like an info training company that taught people about a concept I called lifestyle design. And that was the early seeds of part of what became Ontra, which was like, it was more of like a personal development company. And that scaled really fast. Like that scaled to $1 million a month in less than a year. But then there was some stuff about it I didn't like. So I ended up winding it down. So there I was in 2018. I had just had this like 2-year rise and fall company of this personal development training offer. Plus I sold my agency. I exited it. I was able to sell it off to a software company. And so 2018, I'm like, I'm 39 years old and I'm good. And like I said, I had broken every rule, which it's funny that I have a book sitting here on my desk right here that's called First Break All the Rules. It's ironic. It's a great business management book, but basically this is what I did with my whole life up to that point. And yet I was the one who was retired at 39 years old.
Yeah.
So I started putting out content. I didn't have a clear business model or even a vision for what exactly I wanted to do. I just knew I wanted to share. Right. I wanted to evangelize a set of possibilities. If you want to know the truth, if you want to know like from the dark shadows of my soul, what I really wanted, can I curse on your podcast?
Oh yeah, dude. Say whatever you want. We're good.
So there was a 7th grade guidance counselor that had basically told me and my parents that I was the spawn of the devil. This kid is rotten to the core. He will never amount to anything. And it was just because I was a square peg and the school system was a round hole. Right. And she made me feel so bad about myself. She became the embodiment of the school system itself. And what the school system does to the 50% of kids, that's a real statistic, the 50% of kids who have a learning style and or behavioral style that is not congruent with what schools want kids to do or how they want them to show up or how they want them to be, right? In 2018, I decided to say, fuck you to that. I'm not going to name her name. She's probably passed away. She was older then and would be much older now. I just, that's literally why I did it. It was like my revenge on the school system. I'm like, I'm going to lead. I know that there's a world of adults that are frustrated and because they got steered wrong. And eventually they're going to like, I want to get to them, but really I want to get to their kids. But, you know, so anyway, I started posting social media content of like, this is how I've done what I've done. This is how the modern economy really works. This is what's happened in the world. This is why a broke jazz musician is retired 10 years later. And you probably hate your job. And people were like really receptive to it because I wasn't selling anything.
Right.
And I ended up over the first year I was putting out that content, I had about 2 million people. I was primarily on Facebook. And I had about 2 million people on Facebook that ended up watching my videos. And Facebook's great because it gives you all this data on who's watching your videos. And so eventually I realized, man, there's a real appetite here. And so summer 2019, I actually put a course together. It was kind of like, it was called the Ontra Blueprint, but it was basically like Entrepreneurial Blueprint. But basically it was like digital economy 101, like fundamentals of starting your own thing. I started selling that course in summer of 2019. Brought in a business partner who was a better operator than me. And it scaled. It was going great. We knew we had something. And then in the spring of 2020, COVID happened. And like I said, opportunity or luck is when opportunity meets preparation. Think about COVID. Tens of millions of people basically get sent home, worried about their jobs and worried about money. And they do what I had done 12 years prior. They go online and they Google how to make money online. And Jeff Lerner's there. I just 8 months prior, I just launched a course.
So you're the reason for the Great Resignation is what you're saying.
I mean, thank you. I'm flattered. I hope someday I'll be a footnote when they write the whole book. But yeah, we blew up over the next 2 years, you know, here we are.
Yeah, I love it. And you know, to hear the story and the journey, and I want people to kind of take into consideration the timeframes in which you're talking about, right? To grow. I mean, I forget how much you said you're doing now in your business. You said 9 figures?
Yeah. So we've done, I mean, in about 3 years, we've done about 140 million, 130, 140 million, somewhere in there in revenue. And this year, our stretch goal is 100. I think we'll probably land around 80. I mean, we have I don't want to give away all the plans, but like we have a really ambitious plan for the next 3 years. Like we're going to be, people will know what Ontra is. They may not know who Jeff Lerner is. I don't really care. I want them to know what Ontra is. That's a lie. I care if they know who I am because I believe that I have a really valuable message. But Ontra, I want it to be the tip of the spear of a new education movement that appropriately makes the school systems and the higher education institutions go, oh crap, we failed to evolve and we have been usurped.
Yeah. That's that. And it's crazy. And to think about in this, in 4 years, going from $0 to $80 million a year, using skills and following a process to go, this is what we need to do. I mean, it's absolutely mind blowing.
Can I add one thing to that? When I start, as soon as I said, okay, this is a real business, or this could be a real business, and I brought in my partner, one of the things we wanted to do, in fact, even when I first created an email signature as the CEO of the new business or whatever, it's so funny when you start something and you're like, I'm the CEO, because you're just as much the janitor as you are the CEO, right? Yep. But in the signature of my email, for my job title, I actually put valedictorian. My goal was to be the best student of digital bootstrap entrepreneurship. And so I gave myself constraints, me and my partner, his name's Adam. I'm actually at his house right now. We gave ourselves a constraint that was, we're going to scale this business as the first example of how anybody can scale any business. And so we actually gave I had an American Express with a $20,000 limit. And I said, I will not use more than this credit card to scale this business. So everything we're talking about, I did on one $20,000 credit card to start. No venture capital, no angel backer, no debt, one credit card.
That's huge, man. That's absolutely incredible. And I love hearing the journey and the success and really kind of, figuring it out. And obviously with this podcast, as you know, I've been able to sit down with some of the most successful people in the world, however you want to define success. So I want to ask you a question that I ask every single guest. It's a two-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? The second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Oh, perfect. So, I said that I decided at 16, my currency would be freedom. That hasn't changed. But I've added to that, you could probably interchange the words purpose or impact. Like I did a podcast recently where at the end of it, they were asking like, what does success look like to you? Or what does success feel? I forget the question. What does success feel like? I want to feel like there was a point to me. And to be clear, something more than just, I was a good husband and I was a good father. Like there's 8 billion of us, and we all have a biological and moral imperative to like be good and have families and procreate and do the dance of evolutionary biology. Like that is all amazing stuff. But I believe that we are created as like unique, indelible individuals, and that there is a purpose that is unique to us that is not the same as every other Homo sapien on the planet. And we all want to have kids and perpetuate our genetic line. So I was like, there has to be a point to me that's greater than just my family. And that's not taking anything away from them because they're the most important thing to me. But when I figured out that the point to me is the reason that I suffered so much at the hands of the school system is because I was being primed for this. That's when life got really fun. So that's, I don't even remember your exact question, but that's success for me.
Yeah.
So it's freedom plus that
every day.
It's freedom plus that impact. Because I won't trade it. And again, that's not about me. That's because I have a very teleological sense of what it means to be a human being. And I don't think human beings are supposed to trade impact for freedom. I think we're actually designed to have both, or else we wouldn't long for them.
Right.
God did not plant longings into us for which we were not destined. Right. Bob Proctor talks about this a lot of the time. He didn't give us he, she, it, whatever. Sorry, it's politically incorrect. Did not give us imaginations because we're not meant to dream, or dreaming is futile or frustrating. No, we are meant to dream. We are meant to imagine a different future, and we are meant to do what it takes to make it happen. Right. So anyway, I believe that freedom plus impact. 3 things I do. This is baked right into the foundation of Ontra and my personal brand and everything I teach. We have a concept called the 3 Ps, which are physical, personal, and professional. Those are the 3 areas of life that if you tend to, everything else seems to take care of itself. And they ultimately become kind of a heuristic for looking at your entire life. And frankly, you can identify waste as that which does not grow or develop my life physically, personally, or professionally. And ideally cut that out, use it as a like Occam's razor for your life. And so the 3 things that I do are part of a construct we have called the Entre Day. And we teach people again, my goal is to be the valedictorian, the best student of this, right? Every single day, do something meaningful that moves your life forward physically, personally, and professionally. And it won't always be the same things, but I will say, I coined that concept about 4 years ago, and I don't think I've missed a day of doing something impactful physically, personally, and professionally. And as to make that really tangible, let's say it's one of the rare days I miss the gym or I miss some kind of intense physical exertion. I will not get in bed without at least like, I'm going to sit on the floor and stretch. And we have ways that we quantify, and we call them KPIs for all these different areas of life. So I have 6 different KPIs of my physical and mental wellness as part of the physical aspect of my life, my physiology, my neurology, et cetera. And so I have 6 different types of progress, or 6 different types of actions that I can take. So even if it's just like, you know what, before I went to bed tonight, I stretched. So at least I did something for pliability, which is one of my physical KPIs. Okay, cool. I made a deposit to go to sleep, and I don't miss it. But it's a very dynamic framework. Like I can miss the gym, but anybody can stretch for 5 minutes before they go to bed.
No, 100%. I love the flexibility. Not actually, but with your
I
schedule.
caught that.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's super important, because if you are like, so I talk about this all the time, right? So I have 4 non-negotiables every single day. I don't necessarily do them in the morning. I don't necessarily do them at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There's no actual schedule. I just know I have these 4 non-negotiables. So I do them, right? Sometimes it takes 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes 15 minutes, whatever. And so they have all these structures, and God bless them for people who need them, but like Hal Elrod, right? So the Miracle Morning.
Savers.
Yeah, the Savers, right? Great model. By the way, really funny story I'll tell you after we're done recording about Hal Elrod and Savers and the Miracle Morning. But like, I'm not that person to wake up and immediately do these, just check these things off. But I know that if I do these 4 things, like you said, I deposit on the day, and then I can move forward, and the next day is going to be better because of that deposit. So I love that, man. So I wrap up every single interview with the same question. But before we get there, how do people get a hold of you? Where do they grab your book? What's all the good stuff?
No, I appreciate that. So yeah, my name is Jeff Lerner. My handle everywhere is Jeff Lerner Official. So yeah, and of all the platforms, I really invite people probably to start at YouTube, because there you get the video recordings of all my podcasts, because I have a podcast that I'm really proud of. It's one of the things I think I've done the most correct, most well. But you also I have, I think, like 900 training videos. So when I started my YouTube channel 4 years ago, my goal was I want to create a completely free channel, which YouTube channels are free, obviously, that provides more real world and realizable applicable value than a Harvard MBA, completely for free. And that's been my goal. I'll let somebody else be the judge of whether I've done that. But if you find Jeff Lerner Official on YouTube, at least that's what I was striving for. And then the book, it's called Unlock Your Potential, same as my podcast, and it's available wherever books are sold.
Dude, I absolutely love it. Guys, make sure you check his stuff out. If you Google my name and his name, you can see the interview that we did years ago. It feels like a lifetime ago.
Just a couple kids talking.
That's what it feels like, man. But I'm just so glad that we've been able to have this conversation. Now, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question, and that is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
Man, there've been a few. I'm going to say the one that is kind of a dual purpose answer. It was probably starting Ontra. And that wasn't a moment, that was a phase, right? But it was actually the early phase. It was the baby phase. It was the phase when I had no plan and no real clarity of direction. I was just putting content out, trying to serve and trying to give value and trying to spark up conversations that I thought could move the world forward and genuinely help people. And the reason that was so growth promoting is it was 2 things. It was the first time in my life I ever really, truly put to the test Zig Ziglar's statement that if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll get everything you could possibly want in your life too, right? Because I really was doing it with no ulterior motive. Again, I didn't even, and I'm not like negative on people that sell products. Like, it's hard to impact the world if you don't have revenue to fuel the growth in the machine. But at that time in my life, my only motive was service. I wasn't even asking for anything, right? And if I look at where I am now, I think it's no coincidence that the business that started without a business plan, without a product, without even a merchant account, like I couldn't take money if somebody wanted to give it to me. That's the business that is, my goal is to literally build $1 billion company. And I have probably a reasonable shot at doing it based on some momentum and other factors. And I think that's no coincidence. That is literally Zig Ziglar's statement coming through. But the other reason it was so powerful is because I got a lot of haters too, right? Like I was pushing the content out to the world. And so some guy that nobody's ever seen before, who's, let's face it, not terribly good looking, pops up in your feed and is like, hey, you can have a different life. My name is Jeff Lerner. Let me tell you what I've done. And people were like, a lot of people loved it, hence the growth. A few people were really, really mean, really, really cruel. And so as a little bit of context in the answer, I grew up with a genetic condition, which you never outgrow. It's called Waardenburg syndrome. I've always had an identity of being a funny, weird looking person. Because I got teased a lot as a kid. Like when I was a kid, people were like, "Oh, he rides the short bus." They'd use the R word, and you look challenged and whatever. And so I was very vulnerable in that area, and so I started getting some comments that were like, "This guy looks like he's made of plastic. This guy looks like my video game glitched, and the glitch became his face. This guy, who the hell does this guy think he is? Doesn't he know that you can't be that ugly and an influencer?" Like it was all very targeted on that. And, I had some therapy. I had some work to do. And it's great. It's the best thing because you come out the other side of that stuff and like you take your power back. And that's why I love entrepreneurship too, because at the end, if you get underneath the monetary question, the real reason most people are scared to take the risk is not monetary. It's who do I have to become to be a successful entrepreneur? And if that version of myself is inconsistent with how I've always seen myself or who I've been told I was or what I've been told my limitations are, that cognitive dissonance manifests as fear. And I realized I had a choice to make. If I'm going to take this, I have found my calling, but if I'm going to answer that call, I've got to grow as a person.
That's powerful, man. And it's funny. I've never looked at you and went, that guy's funny looking. Like I've never once in my head whatsoever did I think that. Yeah. So the fact that people attack,
I mean, it probably depends on the angle. It probably depends on the angle or the lighting. But you're right. I mean, this is how most fears are. 98% of them are what we believe about ourselves.
Yeah. And so another fun fact, this was years ago. I posted something and it was just a picture of me and I ran an ad on the Instagram post and somebody commented and said, "You're good looking enough to be an influencer, but your offer's weak." And I was like, damn. I was like, that first of all, I think I replied and go, "Well, thank you very much. That's where my insecurities lie. I appreciate that you said I'm good looking enough to be an influencer." But this was years ago, you know what I mean? And it's just the internet's such a weird, scary place, and to put yourself out there. I mean, it's so powerful. And the one thing years ago, I had Preston Smiles on my podcast. I think it was like episode 70.
Oh, I love Preston.
Yeah, he was a really, really great guy. And he had mentioned that at any given time, there are 75,000 people in this world that need to hear your message specifically from you. And then he said, how selfish of you not to share it. Right? To think about the impact, right? If you're worried about the judgment, if you're worried about what people are going to say, like you weren't, right? So now you've impacted hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs and led them in the right direction. Like that's massive, man. So kudos to you. But I just want to thank you for coming on the show, sharing your journey, sharing everything you've been through. And more importantly, man, helping people get that freedom that they deserve in their life. Because I think that's what we're all really chasing, right? You just worded it the right way. And so thank you so much.
Oh, that means the world. I'm so grateful. And I'll tell you straight up, it feels like a full circle to come on your show, because when you came on my show, it was a young podcast. Ontra was this little thing. Jeff was a nobody. And it was a big deal. I was like, dude, we got Justin Schenck coming on the podcast. He's got like a really badass, legit podcast. Like I'm kind of intimidated, and to be invited on your show, is really meaningful. It's stages of the journey, right?
Yeah, man, for sure. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you.